Now, few movies are complete without a villain to give the hero purpose and let them achieve their full potential, but it's also fair to say that most movie bad guys have fairly typical generic motivations to kill the hero, dominate the world, and, destroy and enslave all of mankind and so on. Sometimes, though, things get a little more interesting than that, especially if the antagonist actually ends up being rather fond of the hero in question. In fact, they can sometimes be obsessed with them enough to be an outright fanboy. And fanboy culture is definitely a strange phenomenon, and to see it reflected in movies themselves is weirder still. Yet given how obsessive people can evidently be in reality, it absolutely makes sense to witness it on screen. So that's what we're here to talk about today. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 movie villains that were total fanboys. Number 10. Kylo Ren, Star Wars The Force Awakens. Perhaps the single smartest idea in the entire Star Wars sequel trilogy was to make the new primary antagonist Kylo Ren a card-carrying Darth Vader fanboy. From early on in The Force Awakens, it's made abundantly clear that Kylo is obsessed with Vader, to the extent of even worshipping the melted remnants of his mask. It's of course worth mentioning that this adoration is only exacerbated by Kylo being Vader's grandson, and throughout the sequel trilogy, he desperately attempts to live up to the legacy of Vader's tyranny. While The Force Awakens perhaps felt a little too much like a soft reboot of the franchise, portraying the new Vader figure as a literal Vader fanboy, and a hilariously petulant, anger-prone one at that, made for a rather clever twist. Some even went as far as to suggest that Kylo was designed to poke fun at Star Wars fanboys themselves, what with his childish tantrums and initial obsession with the past, that is, until he decided that it was better to burn it all down in The Last Jedi. Number 9. Aldrich Killian, Iron Man 3. Iron Man 3's main villain is genius scientist Aldrich Killian, who during the film's opening 1999 set flashback is revealed to be a fawning Tony Stark fanboy. The nerdy Killian approaches Stark and Maya Hansen at a New Year's Eve party where he gushes his admiration for the pair and invites them to join his company, Advanced Ideas Mechanics. Hansen politely humors Killian, but Stark cruelly pranks him by promising to meet him on the roof, yet never showing up. This ends up being a huge mistake on Tony's part though, given that it motivates Killian to seek revenge years later under the guise of the Mandarin. When Killian resurfaces, he's shed his scruffy prior appearance and he's been cured of his physical disabilities by the Extremis virus, which has also given him superhuman regenerative capabilities, making him quite the adversary for Stark. And to think, things could have been so different had Tony simply shown some respect and not blown him off quite so rudely back in 1999. Number 8. Richie and Amber, Scream. The Scream franchise has featured a number of fanboy antagonists, whether obsessed with horror movies or franchise heroine Sydney, though the recent 5th film offered up a terrifically pointed and contemporary riff to this very idea. As it turns out, the killers are Richie and Amber, a pair of literally die-hard fans of the Stab horror movie franchise, a series of in-universe films adapted from the original Ghostface killings. The pair reveal that they met online and, after both being disappointed with the Rian Johnson-directed Stab 8, decided to embark on their own killing spree in Woodsboro. And the goal here, well, is to create the source material for a new Stab movie while luring out the original cast, that is Sydney, Dewey and Gale, to get them back into the fold for good measure. As commentaries on toxic fandoms go, it's pretty ingenious, revealing the villains to be a heightened, nightmarish version of all the social media trolls who make their favorite movie franchise their entire personality. Number 7. Zero, John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum. Though the marketing for John Wick painted antagonist Zero as a typically stoic Japanese assassin, he's actually a far more irreverent character in the final movie. This is especially apparent later in the film when he and John meet up within the safe haven of the Continental Hotel where combat is prohibited. Hilariously, Zero sits uncomfortably close to John on a sofa, and when John moves, Zero awkwardly turns to him to basically start gushing like the dew-eyed fanboy that he is. Zero tells Wick that he's a huge fan and that, amid their scuffles, he hasn't disappointed with regard to his legendary reputation. Zero then fawns over John as his dog leaps up to his lap. It's a testament to Wick's reputation that, despite being charged with killing him, Zero can't help but fanboy out, basically being reduced to a quivering dweeb in Baba Yaga's presence. In fact, Zero's admiration for John extends far enough that he avoids numerous obvious openings to kill him during their final battle, and once John has mortally wounded him, takes a clear perverse pleasure in John acknowledging that they had a pretty good fight. Number 6. The Riddler, Batman Forever and the Batman. Two separate Batman movies have depicted the Riddler as a shameless Batman fanboy, albeit in starkly different ways. In Batman Forever, Edward Nygma is a kooky scientist working at Wayne Enterprises who idolizes Bruce Wayne, and after Bruce rejects Nygma's mind control experiment, he spends the rest of the movie psychotically plotting revenge against him. While in the recent The Batman, the audience is led to believe that Edward Nashton has figured out the Dark Knight's true identity, but during their climactic confrontation at Arkham State Hospital, Nashton reveals that he's actually a Batman fan. More to the point, his attempts to expose Gotham's corrupt underbelly were inspired by Batman's own crusade, under the impression that the two could eventually work together to help clean up the city's streets. It ties so perfectly into the film's overall thematic that Bruce must learn to fight crime in a way that inspires not vengeance, but hope, while showing him the ultimate dangerous potential of vigilante copycats. Number 5. Rupert Pupkin, the King of Comedy. Martin Scorsese's masterful black comedy, The King of Comedy, centers around Rupert Pupkin, an aspiring stand-up comedian with mental health issues who becomes dangerously obsessed with famous late-night TV show host Jerry Langford. Following an encounter with Langford, Pupkin believes that his big break as a comedian is on the horizon, only to be rebuffed by Langford's staff and eventually Langford himself as he persistently attempts to book a slot on his show. Rupert's obsession only ramps up from there, showing up to Langford's home and eventually kidnapping him, holding him ransom in exchange for an appearance on his show. Though Rupert's routine actually goes down rather well with the audience, albeit under the impression that he's joking about kidnapping Langford, he's arrested immediately thereafter. While the film's final sequence is steeped in ambiguity, it's nevertheless clear that Rupert's delusional fascination with his idol hasn't diminished in the slightest. Number 4. Syndrome, The Incredibles. Now, fanboy villains don't get much blatant than The Incredibles' Buddy Pine, who as a 10-year-old boy idolized superhero Mr. Incredible and even attempted to fight alongside him as a sidekick under the name of Incrediboy. But when this results in near disaster, Mr. Incredible rejects Buddy, causing him to bitterly reinvent himself as a supervillain called Syndrome, re-emerging 15 years later with a bevy of high-tech gadgets, which he hopes will make the very idea of superheroism absolutely obsolete. Back in 2004, the idea of a jilted superhero fanboy turning into a supervillain seemed incredibly ahead of its time. And in an era where superhero movie fandom and discourse is regularly unbearable, and so-called fans might often seem intent on tearing down the very thing they supposedly love, it's a notion that is aged so very well. Number 3. Rowan North, Ghostbusters 2016. The 2016 Ghostbusters reboot featured a villain by the name of Rowan North, a mad scientist, occultist with a god complex and major chip on his shoulder about unspecified bullying which happened to him in the past. His plan? To flood New York City with ghosts to basically get revenge on the world he hates. And while Rowan himself isn't a scorned fanboy of the Ghostbusters, his character was very clearly designed to be a thinly veiled parody of overzealous Ghostbuster fanboys themselves. The second that Sony announced that an all-female Ghostbusters reboot was in the works, the usual suspects took to social media to moan that their childhood was being pissed on, and much of that petulant, misplaced energy feels very apparent in the hateful man-child Rowan. Hell, he even ends up literally turning into a kaiju-sized version of the ghost in the Ghostbusters logo, not so subtly symbolizing that he's literally made Ghostbusters his entire damn personality. Hilariously, the director aggressively thumbs his nose at the movie's haters by having Rowan ultimately be defeated when the Ghostbusters fire their proton packs right into his dick. Number 2. Electro, The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man fans were extremely excited when Jamie Foxx was cast as Electro in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, but that enthusiasm quickly melted away within minutes of meeting him in the movie. As it turns out, the baffling decision was made to reimagine Max Dillon as an ultra-nerdy, lonesome Spider-Man fan, who after being rescued by the web-slinger at the start of the movie, develops a deeply unhealthy obsession with him. Max comes to believe that they're the best of friends and even creates his own obscenely creepy Spider-Man shrine, but after an accident transforms him into Electro, his newfound abilities turn him into a power-drunk bad guy. Were he not so pathetically obsessed with Spider-Man, he would have been a sympathetic-ish antagonist, and considering how poorly received this aspect of the characterization was, it's little surprise that it was dropped entirely for his reappearance in Spider-Man No Way Home. Hiring an actor as cool and as badass as Jamie Foxx to play a sweaty, fawning nerd is definitely a choice indeed. And number 1, Mr. Glass, Unbreakable. And finally we have Mr. Glass from M. Night Shyamalan's Unbreakable. Now Glass, whose real name is Elijah Price, suffers from brittle bone disease and finds solace in the comfort of comic books, of which he is an undeniable expert. Glass seeks out David Dunn, the sole survivor of a train crash, under the belief that the pair may be real-life superheroes. On the one end, the ultra-fragile yet extremely intelligent Price, and on the other, the invulnerable Dunn. But at film's end, we learn that Mr. Glass actually caused the opening train crash himself, as well as numerous other high-profile air quotes accidents, all in an attempt to find his superheroic counterpart, the person who would emerge unscathed and give him a true life's purpose. Price was so desperate for the hero-villain dichotomy of his beloved comics to be real that he engineered the circumstances through which himself and Dunn would be brought together. Fanboys don't get much more unhinged than that. And there we go, my friends. Those were 10 movie villains that were total fanboys. I hope that you enjoyed that, and please let me know what you thought about it down in the comment section below. As always, I've been Jules. You can go follow me over on Instagram, where it's @RetroJ, but the O is a 0. Hope to see you over there. But before I go, I just want to say one thing. Even though we spoke today about fanboys who were maybe a little bit too obsessed, there is one thing that I am most definitely a fan of, and you should be a fan of as well, and that is yourself. Treat yourself with love and respect, my friend, because you deserve all of the best things in life, alright? Like love, happiness, and success, and do not let anything or anyone else tell you otherwise. Be your own biggest cheerleader, and let's get you out there and smashing your life goals today. I believe in you. As always, I've been Jules. You have been awesome. Never forget that, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.